The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to St. Matthew. Jesus took Peter, James, and his brother John, and he led them up a high mountain by themselves. He was transfigured before them, and his face shone like the sun, and his clothes became dazzling white. And behold, Moses and Elijah appeared to them, conversing with him. And then Peter said to Jesus in reply, "Lord, it is good for us to be here. If you wish, I will make 3 tents here, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." While he was still speaking, behold, a bright cloud cast a shadow over them, and then from the cloud came a voice saying, "This is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased. Listen to him." When the disciples heard this, they fell prostrate, and they were very much afraid. But Jesus came and touched them, saying, "Rise, do not be afraid." And when the disciples raised their eyes, they saw no one else but Jesus alone. As they were coming down the mountain, Jesus charged them, "Do not tell the vision to anyone until the Son of Man has been raised from the dead." The Gospel of the Lord. The transfiguration of Jesus, what an awesome event it must have been, yeah? Quite something. Would you have appreciated being there? You would. Would it make a big difference? It's a big question. On the 4th day of our pilgrimage through the Holy Land, I read in our brochure, it said, "In the afternoon we take an excursion to the summit of Mount Tabor to visit the site of the transfiguration of Jesus." And I thought, good, going to be nice to see. But it wasn't top of my list or anything of things you must see while journeying through the Holy Land. You know, compared to Bethlehem and the home of Martha and Mary and the tomb of Lazarus, and most especially Calvary and the Church of the Holy Sepulchre where he died for us. But I thought, hey, I'd like to see this place as well, because it was very significant. And most of all, what was really happening there? And as we follow along in the gospel experience, we see there was a lot happening in this event. As we read the gospel today, it said Jesus took Peter and James and John up a high mountain. There are 3 words left out. The opening of St. Matthew's chapter 17 says, 6 days later, Jesus took Peter, James, and his brother John up a very high mountain by themselves. Luke says, about 8 days later, Jesus took them up. Mark says, 6 days later. So what's 2 days, a day or two? Not a big deal, right? But there is a very clear impression that it is related to something else. Something that happened shortly before this, whether it was 6 or 7 or 5 or 8 days, but something significant happened. And as we trace it back in the gospel, it's very easy to find. They were traveling along close to the Sea of Galilee by Caesarea Philippi. And Jesus is journeying with them, and he turns to them and he said, "I got a question." You know the question? Who do people say that I am? It's a pretty bold question. It's a pretty brave question to ask. I don't ask that question. I get the information unsolicited, what people are saying about me. But it's very bold. But for Jesus, it was just a very simple little introductory question. He introduces it to the disciples. What are people saying about me? And of course, the disciples fall for it. They provide the platitudes. Well, some people are saying John the Baptist. Man, he was beheaded, he's back again. Some people are saying Elijah, the greatest prophet of the Old Testament. Some say Jeremiah, one of the prophets of old. And Jesus said, okay, guys, hey, cut the BS. Really. Tell me the real answer to the question. Who do you say that I am? The most important question in the New Testament. It's not by accident that it shows up right at the heart of St. Mark's Gospel in the 8th chapter. Because it is the most important question for all would-be followers of Jesus Christ. Who do you say that I am? It's one thing to tell people and offer platitudes. Oh, you're a healer. You're the Messiah. You're the King. You're the prophet. You're the one who was crucified. You are the Redeemer. But he's saying, come on, guys. Come on, friends. Tell me, what does that mean? What does that mean in practice? And he was doing that with the disciples. And it's rather amazing when we go back there, just before this transfiguration. Peter has a great shining moment. He says, you are the Christ, the Messiah. And what does Jesus say to him? He says, no mere mortal could tell you this. Only my heavenly Father could give you this information. This faith and this information comes only through the movement of the Holy Spirit of God. In Peter's life and in my life and your life. We cannot of our own volition come to that truth, that faith. Only in him. And Peter is a great shining moment. And what happens? They're coming down the mountain. Jesus said, now we got to move on and keep ministering. And by the way, don't tell anybody about this until after the Son of Man has been raised from the dead. In many instances, when you tell somebody that, that's a surefire way of getting the message out, right? Really, I mean, in all honesty, it is true. You tell folk, don't tell anyone. Hey, when you don't tell them that, they quite often don't bother. But it was a little stirring of events. For Jesus, it was really important because it has to do with why the transfiguration period and why is it important? Well, Jesus knew only too well how fickle our faith is. We can have great shining moments, but like that, we can feel pathetic and feel the disaster. And it so happens in this case that after the transfiguration, they come down from the mountain. Jesus talks about it, and what happens? He moves into the first prophecy about his coming death and resurrection. In Matthew's Gospel, follows directly on that. He begins to say, the Son of Man is going to go to Jerusalem. He'll suffer, die, be crucified, and raised up on the third day. And what happens? Poor old Peter, he goes in the tank. He pulls him aside and he says, no, may you be spared, Master. God forbid that any such thing happen to you. And Jesus turned on Peter and he said, get out of my sight, Satan. You are trying to make me trip and fall. You're not judging by God's standards, but by man's. What a powerful reflection. Man, it was quite the rebuke to Peter, whom he loved very much. Get behind me, Satan. Poor old Peter fell in the tank. Man, his shining moment, gone. He drops to the bottom of the barrel. What a humiliation and a humiliating experience. knowing that he loved him. But there was something huge happening here. Jesus recognized clearly his struggle to have faith, just like he recognizes your struggle and my struggle to have faith. He was acknowledging the intense and powerful understanding of human nature and the human condition, the intense nature of sin, and he saw it for Peter. He truly understood the human condition, how easily we can blow hot and cold, and how quickly and dramatically that can change. And so he put in place an extraordinary event. He said, I know how difficult it is to sustain and keep faith in me, but I'm going to show you something really significant, something really important, something that I hope will help you in crunch time. And so after a day of ministry around the Sea of Galilee, he takes the brothers and Peter up the mountain. He said, I want you to come pray with me. I want you to be with me because I'm going to show you something. How interesting was the scene? Why did he just take 3 of the 12? Why didn't he take Bartholomew? Why didn't he take Matthew? Why didn't he take Jude? Why didn't he take Thomas? Thomas could have done with a shot of it, right? Really. But he didn't. He took Peter, maybe because he was clear about the fact that he was going to make him the leader of the church, and he was investing heavily in him. And he took James, maybe because he was to become the leader of the church in Jerusalem. And he took John, the beloved disciple, who was obviously hanging close to him all of the time. Maybe he just took the 3 because they were leaders of leaders and they were very significant in the church that was coming into being. But he took them and showed them quite the experience. How interesting the scene. He's saying to Peter, I know how good you are. I see through all of your foibles and your sin and your weakness and your failing. Watch carefully, he said. I know how impetuous you are. You have great moments and then you have really difficult moments that appear to undermine those. He said, you know, you run your mouth sometimes without putting your brain in gear. But he said it happens to people. But you just don't know how much I love you. I want to share this with you. Peter experiences the event. He's almost speechless, but Peter is almost never speechless. He sees the extraordinary sight, Moses and Elijah, and the conversation taking place. Moses represents the law. Moses, the authorship of the first 5 books of the Bible is attributed to Moses, the Pentateuch. And all of the laws, all 613 precepts of the old law are contained in those books, mostly in Leviticus. And Moses being there was representing the law. And Elijah was representing the prophets, all of the prophets of the Old Testament. In essence, there is very little more in the whole Old Testament than the law and the prophets. And Jesus was giving them this dramatic and extraordinary experience, saying, I am the fulfillment of all of this, the law and the prophets. And it is coming together, and then the voice comes and the cloud that overshadows them. This is my beloved Son. It's the second time we hear it, remember? His baptism. This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. Listen to him. Well, we listen and we hear a lot, but it's really hard to keep engaged in it. And so Jesus was giving them this experience to strengthen their faith in the face of the difficult challenges that lay ahead. It was sort of like a booster shot, a huge shot of vitamin C in the face of, the struggles of the present time. Jesus is saying, I'm giving you a real shot here. Hopefully, it will sustain you in the days ahead. And Peter's response is, hey, let's not go back down, man. Forget about all these other people. Why don't we build 3 tents here? I'll do the building. What was he going to build them out of? Rock? Really. It was just a little exuberant moment, And Jesus said, no. Mountaintop experience is given for valley duty. He gives mountaintop experiences to every person who hears him, every person who listens to him. He does it all of the time. Just like, 2 weeks ago, I was saying Mass on Monday morning. He said, speak to that woman after Mass. What am I going to speak to her about? He said, don't worry about it, I'll tell you. He did. It's an extraordinary conversation to support her in the struggle that she was going through. He does it all of the time with his people. He speaks to you and I all of the time. Question is, do we hear him? Do we listen to him? This is my beloved Son, listen to him. And then he had asked them to keep this deeply within themselves until such time as the Son of Man was raised from the dead. They had no clue what that was about. He had predicted the first prophecy, and he had to tell them again, and he had to tell them again, and he has to tell us again and again. And so the challenges come indeed, as they naturally will. They're not too far along the road, and Jesus turns and says, all of you are going to leave me. No way. Hey, even if all of them should leave you, I won't leave you, says Peter. Try again. God bless us, we do. We're fickle. We're fickle. Imagine if we could see and feel and experience as he does, how different our lives would be. And then we have the other two, James and John. A great little story as they're journeying along the way. They cozy up to Jesus and they say, by the way, we have a request. Any chance you could help us out? And Jesus said, what is it? Well, we've been thinking about this. We were wondering if we could sit one at your right hand and the other at your left hand when you come into the kingdom. Pretty novel idea, right? And Jesus said, do you know what you're asking? Can you drink the cup that I must drink? Can you carry the cross that I must carry? Can you integrate yourself into the people and the relationships that I have in mind for you? Yeah, he said, you will suffer. You'll certainly have a share in the passion, because all of my followers share in the passion, because it is a part of taking up the cross and following me. Nobody goes through without the experience of the cross. And when he came to the cross, who was there? It wasn't James and John that were on either side, right? No? Yes? No? No, it sure was not. It was two very ordinary, struggling criminals. He gave them the experience, and he gives experiences to you and I all of the time. And the big question is, what do we do with them? Does it support us? Can you drink the cup? Can you share in the passion? He provides moments of transfiguration in everybody's life. And today we, like Peter, gather on the second Sunday of Lent, and Become aware, hey, we're fickle, we need help. And a week from tomorrow night, we will have our annual Lenten penance service. I invite you to really be reflective about the opportunity and the grace. We will have like 12 priests here to celebrate the sacrament of his forgiveness. And the bishop, if you really want to feel like you want to go higher. But to celebrate the power of his forgiveness, that's what was happening in this. And it was connected to the whole journey, not just the part of it. It was not just some wonderfully dramatic, isolated event. It was connected particularly to the question, who is Jesus Christ in my life? And hopefully on this second Sunday we could say, along with Peter, it's good for us to be here. It really is, because we're fickle and we have difficulty holding it together, just like Peter and just like James and John. But by doing this, as Peter cried out, it's good for us to be here. It is good for us to be here, to hear his word and to celebrate the sacrament he is giving us and to proclaim our response to his question, who do you say that I am in your life?